All right, we are going to start lesson 1.5. We are going to be factoring today when A is 1 and when A is not 1. We've already done this, so this should just be a review. All right, definition of a quadratic equation. It says a quadratic equation in X is an equation that can be written in the general form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a cannot be 0. A quadratic equation in X is also called a second-degree polynomial equation in X. And we're going to do something else today. Before we just factored them, now we're actually going to use the zero product principle to solve it. If you remember, when we factored this, we ended up with something times something. Well, today the only difference is we're going to set it equal to 0. And then the zero product principle says if you're multiplying two things and it equals 0, then A has to equal 0 or B has to equal 0. One of the things has to be 0 because the only way you're going to get 0 when you multiply two things is if one of them is equivalent to 0. So to find your solutions after you factor, you set them each to 0 and you get X alone. Okay, so to factor general trinomials, ax squared plus bx plus c when a equals 1, meaning there's a 1 there, or they won't write it, it's just x squared something. Your steps are get 0 on one side, find all the factors of c, set up two binomials with x in each one, and then find your factors of c that make b and put them in there, here and here, and then do your signs. If c is positive, then these both get to take whatever's in the middle. If c is negative, if this was a negative c, then only the bully would get to copy the middle sign and the other one would have to be the opposite. All right, so here we go. It says solve by factoring. So the first thing we have to do is get 0 on one side. So I'm going to minus 3 from both sides, which gives me x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. Step 2 says find all the factors of c. In this case, my a is 1, b is negative 2, c is negative 3. I need all of the factors of 3. Well, the only factors of 3 are 1 times 3, which can make 4 if I add or 2 if I subtract. 2 is what I want, so those are my factors. So it says write two binomials. I promise x and x when a is 1, because the only way you're going to FOIL and get x squared is if you take x times x. Okay, that gives me that back. Now, I know that 1 and 3, 1 has to be in one, 3 has to be in the other, and it doesn't matter which one. All you have to do is figure out your signs. If c is positive, they will both take the middle. Everybody wants to be b. Everybody wants to be the sign of b. So 1 and 3 both are going, I want to be negative, I want to be negative, I want to be negative. The only way they can both be negative is if c is positive. My c is not positive, my c is negative, which means only the bully gets to be like the middle. So 3 would be the bully, he gets to be the minus, which means 1 has to be the positive. Okay, and you can always check it, FOIL it back out. X times x would be x squared, that'd be minus 3x, plus 1x is minus 2x, minus 3 is on the end. So I know I factored it right. Now we have one more step to do. When we factored in the last unit, we were done. Now we have to actually factor and solve. Okay, so what we're going to do then is use the zero product property, which says if something times something is 0, then either x plus 1 is the 0 or x minus 3 is the 0. And you solve them both. To get x alone on this one, I'd minus 1, so x equals negative 1. To get x alone on this one, I'd add 3, so x equals 3. So my two solutions are negative 1 and 3. Don't put them in round brackets or round parentheses, because that's going to look like an ordered pair, and we don't have an ordered pair. What you have just found is this parabola, whatever it's going to do, it's going to cross the x-axis at negative 1 and at positive 3. And we'll get into more graphing later, but I know that since x squared is positive, this parabola is going to open up. Now, I don't know about where the vertex is, we'll find that later, but I know that this parabola is going to pass through those 2 points. That's why we call them solutions. They're also called zeros. Okay? All right. You don't have to graph. I'm just showing you kind of what's coming. All right, so let's do another one. It says get 0 on one side. There's not even an equation, so just set it equal to 0. Find all the factors of C. Factors of 20 would be 1 times 20, which would make 21 if I added, 19 if I subtracted. I'm trying to make 9. 2 and 10. If I add, I get 12. If I subtract, I get 8. Nope. 3 times a decimal doesn't work. 4 times 5. If I add, is 9. There it is. So that's my pair. So I set up my two binomials. The only way to get x squared is to take x times x. And my two numbers are going to be a 4 and a 5. And then all I have to do is figure out the signs, which if you look at C, it'll tell you. My C is positive, so they both get to be the middle sign, which is positive. Okay, so now we factored. Now we're going to use the zero product property to finish solving, which says that either x plus 4 equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0. If I solve the first one, minus 4, I get x equals negative 4. Minus 5, I get x equals negative 5. My two solutions are negative 4 and negative 5. Again, what you have found is that this thing is going to cross the x-axis at negative 4 and at negative 5. And it opens up, so it's going to do something like that. Again, I don't know about the vertex. We'll learn that later. But what you're finding when you solve a quadratic is its x-intercepts. Its solutions. Its zeros. Those are all words to describe those 2 points you just found. All right, let's try another one. All right, it says get 0 on one side. Merry Christmas it is. Find all the factors of C. Okay, in my case, A is 1, B is negative 11, C is 30. So if I find all the factors of 30, 1 times 30 is 30. If I add, I get 31. Subtract, I get 29. I'm trying to make 11. So 2 times 15, if I add, is 17. If I subtract, is 13. No 11. 3 and 10, if I add, is 13. Subtract, is 7. Still no 11. 4 doesn't go into 30 evenly. 5 and 6, if I add, I get 11. There's my pair. So I'm going to have two binomials. The only way to get x squared is x times x. And the factors of 30 that I want are 5 and 6. Then all I have to do is figure out the sign. Since C is positive, they both get the middle sign. Okay, factoring is done. So now when I solve, I say x minus 5 is 0 or x minus 6 is 0. And get x alone. Add 5, x equals 5. Add 6, x equals 6. So my two solutions are 5 and 6, which means this parabola is going to cross the x-axis at 5 and 6. It's going to do something like that. Okay. Alright. Again, get 0 on one side. So I'm going to minus 4x, which gives me x squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Okay, so then it says find all the factors of C. Factors of 21 are 1 times 21. If I add, I get 22. Subtract, I get 20. I'm trying to make 4, so that didn't work. 2 doesn't go into 21 evenly. 3 goes in there 7 times. If I add, I get 11. If I subtract, I get 4. 4 is what I want, so there's my numbers. So, bino, x and x, 3 and 7, and figure out your signs. Since my C is negative, then only the bully gets to take the middle. So 7 gets the minus, and 3 has to be the opposite. So then when I solve this, set them to 0. So I have x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 7 equals 0. To solve, minus 3, I get x equals negative 3. Add 7, I get x equals 7. So my two solutions are -3 and 7, which means this parabola crosses the x-axis at -3 and 7. Pretend I hit the intercepts. Alright, you try one, hit pause and give it a shot. And we're back. Hopefully you got -2, 3. If you didn't, let's look at why. I have to get 0 on one side, so I'm going to minus x. That gives me x squared minus x equals 6. Minus 6 minus 6, I get x squared minus x minus 6 equal 0. Okay, so I'm going to find out my a is 1, b is -1, c is -6. So I need all the factors of c. Factors of 6, 1 times 6. If I add, I get 7. Subtract, I get 5. And I'm trying to make 1, so that didn't work. 2 times 3, if I add, is 5. If I subtract, is 1. There's my pair. So, x and x, 2 and 3. I just have to figure out my signs. Since c is negative, then only the bully gets the middle. So the bully takes the minus, and 2 is going to take the plus. And then when I solve, x plus 2 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, minus 2, I get x equals -2, add 3, I get x equals 3. Okay? Try another one. And hopefully you got 3. If you didn't, let's look at why. 0 is already on one side. Find all the factors of c. 44. 1 times 44. If I add, I get 45. Subtract, I get 43. I'm trying to make 7. 2 and 22. If I add, I get 24. Subtract, I get 20. Not 7. 3 doesn't go into 44. 4 goes into 44 11 times. Add is 15. Subtract is 7. That's what I want, so my numbers are 4 and 11. So x and x, 4 and 11. All I have to do is figure out my signs. Since my c is negative, only the bully gets the middle. So my bully 11 gets the positive, and 4 has to be the negative. Then if I solve, x minus 4 equals 0, x plus 11 equals 0, add 4, I get x equals 4, subtract 11, I get x equals -11. Okay, now when a is not 1, you have to do the whole a times c sum. You can't just make 2 binos and stick x and x and the factors in there. You're going to have to do a times c, find all the factors, rewrite b, 2 by 2, GCF, GCF, GCF again. Woo! Alright, here we go. We still have to get 0 on one side. So I'm going to minus 3. That gives me 2x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. And we start. First step is divide each term by a GCF, actually, but there's nothing that goes into 2, 1, and 3, and they don't all have x's, so there's nothing in common. So I'm ready to do a times c. So 2 times 3, don't worry about signs, is 6. Find all the factors of 6. 1 times 6, and I'm trying to make 1 in the middle. Okay? If I add 1 and 6, I get 7. Subtract, I get 5. I didn't make 1. 2 times 3, add is 5, subtract is 1. That's my pair. But instead of just sticking them in parentheses, alright, because a isn't 1, if I just stuck them in parentheses, like I did when a is 1, and even did my signs, let's see, c is negative, so the bully would take the middle. If you try and FOIL this back out, alright, you're going to get x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 6. I get, that's x squared minus x minus 6. That is not, minus x minus 6. That is not my original function. So my, when a is 1 trick doesn't work. But all we've got to do is like 2 extra steps. Rewrite b. So what that means is I'm going to rewrite negative 1x with a 2x and a 3x somehow. Again, my signs depend on C. Since C is negative, then only the bully is going to get the middle. So bully 3 is going to be the minus and 2 is going to be the plus. Okay? You bring down the first term and the last term. So I have 2x squared minus 3 equals 0. And now we're at grouping because we have 4 terms now. So now we are at 2 by 2. And then we're going to GCF, GCF, GCF again. Woo! Okay, this side, the left-hand side, has a 2 in common and 1 copy of x in common. So the GCF on this side is 2x. To get what's left, you divide both terms by 2x. 2x squared divided by 2x just leaves x. And a positive 2x divided by itself is a positive 1. GCF on the other side, the only thing these two have in common is a 3. They don't have any x's. And remember, always, always, always take this guy's sign. So my GCF isn't just going to be 3, it's going to be negative 3. To get what's left, divide. Negative 3x divided by negative 3 leaves positive x. Negative 3 divided by itself is positive 1. At this point, we're at GCF again. If you don't have a matching binomial on both sides at this point, one of two things is going on. Either you messed up somewhere, or the polynomial is prime and can't be factored. But I have a matching bino, it's x plus 1. To get the other bino, you divide by your GCF, which leaves 2x minus 3. Okay, so that's factoring when a isn't 1, and now we have to solve it though. We factored it, but now we have to solve it. The zero product property says when you multiply something by something else and get 0, then one of the somethings has to be 0. Okay, so either x plus 1 is 0 or 2x minus 3 is 0. So if I solve each one of these, minus 1, I get x equals negative 1. Add 3, I get 2x equals 3. X isn't alone yet on this one. Divide by 2, and x equals, just leave it a fraction, 3/2. So my two solutions are negative 1 and 3/2, or 1.5. Okay? Alright, let's try another one. We're just trying to be jerks. You've got to get this in standard form, which means ax squared plus bx plus c on one side of the equal sign. Well, I got to distribute first. That's going to give me 2x squared minus 6x equals 6x squared minus 7x. Now, you got to get 0 on one side. So you either have to move everything on the left to the right or everything on the right to the left. Since I don't like negative x squared terms, I'm going to move the smaller x squared and stay positive. So minus 2x squared minus 2x squared, I get negative 6x equals 4x squared minus 7x. Okay, and then I'm going to add 6x to both sides. And I get 0 equals 4x squared minus x. Now, notice here that we don't have any constant. So I don't have to do the whole a times c thing. All I have to do when there's two terms is it's either one of the specials, difference of squares, or sum or difference of cubes, or I can just GCF times what's left. The only thing these two have in common is an x. So my GCF is x. If I divide by it, 4x squared divided by x, I get 4x. Negative x divided by positive x is negative 1. And I still have the zero product property. It's this factor times this factor. So either x is 0 or 4x minus 1 is 0. If it's this one, I'm already done. X is already alone. To finish this one, I'd have to add 1. And that gives me 4x equals 1. Divide by 4. And I get x equals 1/4. So my two solutions are 0 and 1/4. You can get 0 for an answer. Okay. Alright, let's look at this one. Again, I need to get this in standard form. I have to take care of these parentheses, but if I want to square that without killing puppies, I have to make 2 copies and distribute. Alright, so I have negative 3x plus 2 equals 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Combine like terms. And I have 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. I still got to get 0 on one side. Again, my x squared is on this side and it's positive and I want to keep it that way, so I'm going to move to the right. So I'm going to add 3x, add 3x. That leaves me 2 equals 4x squared minus x plus 1. Then I would subtract 2 and I get 0 equals 4x squared minus x minus 1. Okay? Alright, so now we have our general trino, and we're going to try and factor it. So 4 times 1, a times c is 4. Factors of 4, 1 and 4, which if I add I get 5, if I subtract I get 3, I'm trying to make 1, so that didn't work. 2 and 2, if I add I get 4, if I subtract I get 0, that didn't work. So there's no way to make b. If there's no way to make b at this point, until we do quadratic formula or another method, at this point, can't factor it. So we say that this is prime. If you cannot make b, then your polynomial is prime. Sometimes you can make b, but you can't get a matching binomial. Both cases, it's prime, unless you made a mistake. Alright, so let's look at this one. Again, let's get 0 on one side, so I'm going to minus 9x. Minus 9x, I have 6x squared minus 9x equals 0. So again, we don't have a trinomial, we just have a binomial. So we can factor it by a GCF times what's left. They both have a 3 in common and 1 copy of x. So my GCF is 3x. If I divide by that, 6x squared divided by 3x would leave me 2x. Negative 9x divided by positive 3x is negative 3. And factoring is done, but now we need to solve. So here's my product. So either 3x is the 0 or 2x minus 3 is the 0. To get x alone on the first one, divide by 3, I get x equals 0. Add 3 on the second, and I get 2x equals 3. Divide by 2, and I get x equals 3 halves. So my two solutions are 0 and 3 halves. Alright, you try. And hopefully you got number 1. If you didn't, let's look at y. I got to get 0 on one side, so minus 7 gives me 8x squared minus 55x minus 7 equals 0. You should always look for GCF first, but they have nothing in common. So I'm ready to do a times c. So my a times 7, no signs. Remember, I'll take care of signs later. 8 times 7 is 56. Factors of 56, 1 and 56. If I add, I get 57. Subtract, I get 55. And that's what I want. So those are my two numbers that I'm going to rewrite b with. So I'm going to have a 1x and a 56x. I just have to figure out my signs. Well, since c is negative, only the bully gets the middle sign. So 56 gets the negative and 1 has to take the positive. Everything else comes down. 8x squared minus 7. Now I'm at 2 by 2. So GCF again. Woo. Alright, the only thing that they have in common on the left is an x. So my GCF is x, which would leave 8x plus 1. What these guys have in common is a 7. And sometimes, guys, you can use the first one as kind of a clue as to what you need to do. I know that the first term has to be 8, and I know that bino has to match. So I know the first term has to be 8x, and the second one has to be 1. The only way I'm going to get 1 is if I divide by 7, and sure enough, they have a 7 in common. No x, but they have a 7, and I always take the sign after the wall, which is negative. So if I divide by negative 7, I get positive 8x, positive 1. And now you see that I have a matching bino. So my GCF again is the 8x plus 1, and my what's left is going to be x minus 7 equals 0. Now they didn't just say factor it, they said solve it. So after you factor, then you set each factor to 0 and solve. So to solve the first one, I'm going to subtract 1. I get 8x equals negative 1. Divide by 8. I get x equals negative 1/8. Solve this one, add 7, and I get x equals 7. So my two solutions are negative 1/8 and 7. Okay, try another one. And you should get 0 and 7/12. If you did not, let's look at why. I don't have to do the 8 times seesaw because this is not a general trinomial. When there's only two terms, either just GCF times what's left, or you can do, or if they're perfect squares or cubes. But this one is just GCF times what's left. All they have in common, is an x, so if I pull an x, that leaves 12x minus 7. I'm at the zero product property already, because I have something times something equals 0, so either x is 0 or 12x minus 7 is 0. That one's done. Just get x alone on the second one, I'm going to add 7. So I get 12x equals 7, divide by 12, and I get x equals 7/12. So my two solutions are 0 and 7/12. Okay, try another one. Push pause. And I hope you got 0 1/4. If you didn't, let's look at why. I have to distribute first. That's going to give me 3x squared minus 9x equals 7x squared minus 10x. I need to get everything on one side. I'm going to move my 3x squared over. Keeps it positive, so that gives me negative 9x equals 4x squared minus 10x. Then I'm going to add 9x, and I get 0 equals 4x squared minus x. If I factor, there's only two terms, so the only thing I can do is GCF times what's left. The only thing these two have in common is an x. And if I pull an x, that leaves 4x minus 1. We're at the zero product property that says then either x is 0 or 4x minus 1 is 0. That one's done. To solve this one, I'm going to add 1. I get 4x equals 1. Divide by 4. I get x equals 1/4. Hence my two answers. Okay, go. Hit pause. And you should have got negative 1, negative 1/3. Let's look at why. If you didn't get that, I have to simplify. So parentheses first means I'm going to make two copies. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 6x minus 2 equals 9x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 1. Combine like terms. I have negative 6x minus 2 equals 9x squared plus 6x plus 1. Okay, I got to get 0 on one side, so I'm going to add 6x. That gives me negative 2 equals 9x squared plus 12x plus 1. Add 2. And I finally have 0 on one side, which equals 9x squared plus 12x plus 3. So now we have to solve this, or factor this. So a times c, 9 times 3 is 27. Factors of 27. 1 and 27. If I add, make 28. Subtract makes 26. And I'm trying to make 12, so that didn't work. 2 goes into 27, a decimal. 3 goes in there 9 times. If I add, I get 12. That's what I want. So I'm going to rewrite the middle with 3x and 9x. All I have to do is figure out the signs. Well, since c is positive, they both take the middle sign, which is positive, positive. Alright? And then we're going to drop down the 9x squared in front and the 3 at the back. Remember, this all still equals 0. So we found a times c, found all the factors. We rewrote b, 2 by 2, GCF, GCF, GCF again. Woo! These two, 9x squared and 3x, have a 3x in common. So that's my GCF. Divide leaves 3x plus 1. On the other side, they have a 3 in common, and I'm going to take the positive. If I divide by positive 3, I get 3x plus 1. And now I should have a matching binomial. If I don't, I either did something wrong or it's prime. Okay, so my GCF is 3x plus 1, and what's left is going to be 3x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so now we got it factored. Now to solve, we have to set them to 0. So either 3x plus 1 equals 0, or 3x plus 3 equals 0. I could factor 3 out of that. Anyway, to solve the first one, I'm going to minus 1, 3x equals negative 1, divide by 3, x equals negative 1/3. Minus 3, 3x equals negative 3, divide by 3, x equals negative 1. Alright, so how do you solve a quadratic equation by factoring and using the zero product property? Well, you factor either using, when a is 1, it's just 2 binomials with the factors of c. If a isn't 1, then you have to do the whole a times c song. But then once you find your factors, then you set each one to 0 and solve. Okay? And we are done. So have a good evening, and I will see you tomorrow.